Meron? Ano nga ba ang meron? Paano nga bang mabuhay ng tapat sa meron? Don't you wish you can relive your Philo classes? The terror teachers? The terrible oral exams? Or the even terrifying but liberating and life-changing aha moments? Lundagin Mo Beybeh! Here's your chance! Lundagin Mo Beybeh! Kasama ang mga pilosopong sina Jovy Miroy at Capinding. Lundagin Mo Beybeh! Leaping upward, leaping forward. Lundagin Mo Beybeh! Leaping to greater heights, to greater wisdom, to greater magis. Lundag na, Ateneo!
Good afternoon. It's me again, Dr. Jovy Miroy, without my good friend Ron Capinding. He'll be back next week. We'll be back together with our usual tandem and show. But this week, it's the fourth of the series, followed by the synthesis episode of the Philosophy Department plenary content on the emotions and being human. So just to recall, the first episode was on Aristotle, the eudaimonia, pleasure and pain. Then we went to René Descartes, where we talked about the motivational function of emotions, and then Spinoza, which spoke of intellectual love. This week, we're going to talk about the philosophy of emotions found in the phenomenology of Max Scheler. But before that, I would like to remind you that last week we went to the cemeteries to remember our dead, and both those who are already in heaven and those who have recently died. So we continue to pray for them in the whole month of November. And if you still haven't gone to the cemetery to clean your grave, the graves of our beloved departed, you can still do so. So, without further ado, we'll present the summary of the philosophy of emotions of Max Scheler, followed by an interview by our subject expert, who is no less than the legend, Dr. Manny D. So to give us the PowerPoint presentation is Reynald Lismores, who lovingly, with his heart, prepared the summary of the philosophy of emotion of Max Scheler. Take it away, Reynald.
Have you already watched or read Romeo and Juliet, written by Shakespeare? If you do, then most probably you arrive at the conclusion that lovers are fools. It is because if Romeo had only overcome his passion and desperation, then the tragedy might have been avoided. He might not drink the poison, and eventually Juliet may not stab herself. Perchance, Plato is right when he said that love is a serious mental disease. Also, have you ever had an experience wherein you are swallowed up by your emotions? Let us say you have a classmate, and he says something disgusting about you, that you become a laughingstock in the class. You are so mad at him that you instantly hit him right in the face. But when you regain the right state of mind, you deeply regret what you have done, since the situation might not go as far as that if you were just able to withhold your anger. The point is, the human heart tends to be fooled by emotions and prejudice. It is as if to surrender to its cunning snares would be to face tragic consequences. It is for this reason that humans have an extreme distrust in it. In fact, not just simple folks, but even most philosophers and spiritual leaders believe that the mark of a sage or a holy person is to rise above his instincts and passions, to conquer them for the mighty sword of thought. More so, they argue that the aspiration for the good necessitates the affirmation of reason, and thus the negation of emotion in all respects. Indeed, for so long a history, reason is perceived as the moral compass, and by extension, feeling is construed as the ultimate obstruction of morality. Despite its vicious propensities, it cannot be denied nor ignored that the heart, the seat of the affect, is part and parcel of human nature. This fundamental truth of man's existence entails that it cannot be an evil per se, for that would imply that man possesses an evil nature, which is just a sheer absurdity. Were it so, man's ethical pursuit is but a rubbish, for he is already predetermined to commit evil no matter what. This realization, therefore, raises some serious questions. Is the affect problematic, such that it causes us to commit evil choices? Does feeling lead us to a good life, or the otherwise? What is the fundamental relationship between feeling and goodness? What is feeling in the first place? Today's episode would focus on Max Scheler's account on the affect. Without a doubt, Scheler plays a pivotal role in the development of moral philosophy because he is able to provide a systematic and comprehensive account on the affective dimension of man in his most significant book, Formalism in Ethics and Non-Formal Ethics of Values, a task which is deemed unthinkable in the history of ethics, but proves to be not only possible, but compelling, for he influences profoundly not just philosophers, but even Pope St. John Paul II, whose dissertation deals primarily with his principal ideas. Above all, he shows that emotions have a spiritual nature and thus can be a starting point for living an ethical life. So what is feeling? Contrary to the rationalist persuasions that it is chaotic, Scheler argues that feeling possesses its own logic, a peculiar one, irreducible to the intellect. He therefore believes in Pascal's saying, "The heart has its reasons, which reason knows not." This is exactly why a lover cannot adequately explain to someone why he loves his beloved in the first place. Only the heart knows why. For just as the eyes are blind of noise, and the ear deaf to color, the intellect as well is blind of the values perceived by the heart. The erroneous reasoning of the rationalists, however, stems from an illicit generalization. That is, since a particular aspect of the affect is often defective, particularly those corporeal in nature, they hastily conclude that its whole edifice contains a stockpile of filth to be cleansed by man's rational powers. But there are as well higher types of affective responses. For instance, love, hope, sympathy, longing, and the like, which undeniably have equal value to those prized by the intellect. Hence, the heart is not blind. It has its own unique structure, which is as valid as the mind, that cannot be traced from any human faculty, but to itself alone. The crucial thing about feeling is that it is an immediate response to value. For example, you feel pain in your stomach. Probably, you might have eaten something bad. But the thing is, the feeling of pain makes you aware of the value of health. And since you value your health that much, certainly, you would seek some medical advice from a physician. In addition, let us say this is a hell week for you, since you need to study a lot, do your papers, prepare for oral exams, and so on, to such extent that you're already like dead on your feet. Be as it may, the feeling of fatigue suddenly makes you realize that you also need to get some rest, because this exhaustion would not only affect your physical well-being, but also your mental health or stability. Moreover, say for instance you have the opportunity to see Van Gogh's Starry Night. Most probably, you would be in utmost awe, or you would have the feeling of great admiration. But as one may see, this feeling of awe points to the very value of beauty. Furthermore, let us suppose for a moment that you have this insatiable passion to read. Whenever you read something, you feel like you are so happy. But the thing is, the feeling of bliss in reading is basically grounded on the value of knowledge, so on and so forth. Thus, feeling is instantly directed to value. For this reason, it can be said as to possess an intentional character. In phenomenology, however, intentionality does not mean purposeful or motivational, which entails a goal. Rather, it means directionality, that is, immediately related to an object, which is in this case value. Indeed, feeling leads us to the cognizance of values. It is like the key which allows us to enter the home where values reside. Hence, it is our personal response to the world of values. The mind, however, cannot perceive them, for the act of valuing or valueception is at the most fundamental level an act of the heart grounded in its own logic. It clearly follows then that feeling and value essentially belong to each other. They form a symmetry only intuition can ascertain. In this instance, we can see the very heart of Scheler's argument. If feeling is inextricably linked to value, and if value is in essence good, it follows then that the affect is a potential source, a genuine one indeed, of moral choices. That being said, it is safe to affirm that it does not necessarily lead us to commit evil acts, for in reality, it paves the way for one to live an ethical life. It might be asked then, how can one make moral choices out of the recognition of values? Prior to responding the question at hand, perhaps some clarifications have to be made. Scheler, however, sets out a theory on the hierarchy of values. According to him, there are basically 4 different kinds of values, organized in separate levels. They are the sensory, the vital, the spiritual, and the holy, respectively from bottom to top. The lowest level pertains to whether something is agreeable and pleasurable or not. Evidently, these are the values that are objects of sensory feelings, and their corresponding subjective states are pleasure and pain. At the vital level, there is the promotion of the general well-being. Their corresponding states of feeling are sickness, exhaustion, energy, vigorousness, etc. And the responses are being pleased or distressed, courage, anxiety, anger, and so on. In stark contrast to the preceding 2, the spiritual values are distinct, hence they are independent of the body, hence irreducible to vital and sensory values. Example of which would be the values of the just and pure knowledge. Their corresponding feeling states are spiritual joy and sorrow, and the responses are delight and dislike, reverence and contempt, etc. Above all, The holy are totally independent of anything, since they are by nature absolute objects. Their subjective states are bliss and despair, faith, awe, adoration, etc. As one may see, the sensory and vital values are those which are pertaining to life, whereas values of the spiritual and the holy are values of the person. To a certain extent, Scheler might be accused of being arbitrary, since he appears to be simply fabricating this hierarchy. On the contrary, he contends that it is through the heart, the intuitive nature of feeling, that the order of values unfold before the person. It is because there is a necessary connection between the logic of the heart and the hierarchy of values. For instance, by virtue of intuition, one can immediately see that welfare is under any circumstances higher than pleasure, and dignity, life. This unique cognition, however, is not deduced from experience, but is instantly revealed in the very act of preference itself. Thus, this hierarchy is eternal and necessary, not subject to the changes of valuations in all cultures and historical periods. So, it may now be asked, what determines the goodness of an action? Scheler asserts that an act is good if a higher value instead of a lower one is realized, whereas an act is evil if it leads to the actuality of lower value instead of higher one. In a nutshell, the goodness of an act lies in the option for higher value. So let us say, for example, you are tired and sleepy, but not sick. However, at the same time, you have a class to attend to. Though health is undoubtedly a value, and so you need to sleep, there seems to be an existing higher demand which calls for a just response on your part: the value of knowledge. Considering this, it is more ethical to choose the value of knowledge over that of health, since the spiritual is always higher than the vital. In addition, let us suppose you go to a mall to buy a pair of shoes. Meanwhile, you pass by an elderly begging for food. But the problem is you did not bring enough money. Now, if you give some food to the person, then you might not get the shoes that you want on that very day. Probably, other days may still work out for you, but it would already be inconvenient on your part due to the rigidity of your studies. Despite this, the more urgent response and the more ethical decision remains, and that is to offer some help to the needy, since in the final analysis, the vital is always higher than the sensory. Thus, it is through feeling that values are made manifest to the person, and it lies in one's option to will higher values that one can make ethical choices. Having said this, if something is more valuable in a particular situation, it now becomes one's primary duty to prefer and eventually realize that which is higher. The song is Love Story, popularized by Taylor Swift, which is based around the characters from Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet. In the song, however, Juliet persuades Romeo to stay with her and affirm their love. That is, say yes to their affection despite drawing scorn from family and friends.
We were both met you on the outskirts of town, and I said, Romeo, save me. I've been feeling so alone. I keep waiting for you, but you never come. Is this in my head? I don't know what to think. He knelt to the ground and pulled out a ring and said, marry me, Juliet. You never have to be alone. I love you, and that's all I really know. I talked to your dad. Go pick out a white dress. It's a love story, baby. Just say yes. We were both young when I first saw you.
Indeed, their love is difficult, but it is just so real to deny. However, it might be asked, is there yes a preference for higher value? Or does it lead to the realization of lower values? What do you think is the more valuable option, the more ethical decision to be made in that situation? To say yes or no to their affection?
Okay, so we're in the interview portion where we deepen our understanding of Scheller's philosophy of emotions and how it fits into his moral philosophy. Here with us to do that is, of course, the subject expert on Scheler, Dr. Manny D, who's not only an expert on Scheler, but on ethics, etc. Doc Manny, welcome to Lundagin Mo Beybeh. So, the PowerPoint presentation mentioned that John Paul II wrote his dissertation not on Thomas, no, although he studied in the Angelicum, but on Scheler. So you have a story about John Paul II. How did you begin? When did you wrote on Scheler in your dissertation?
Was that was in 1978. Just when Pope John Paul I died.
Yes.
Okay. And so I was beginning to write on Scheler, and then when John Paul II was elected, I discovered that he was also
a Scheler scholar.
A Scheler scholar.
Yes,
you know?
yes.
So I was very happy, and so when I finished my dissertation,
he went to Cebu,
and he visited us.
Yes,
and he was going to give a talk in Cebu.
Yes,
at my high school alma mater.
Yeah.
So I said,
in Ateneo, in Sacred Heart. Ateneo de Cebu.
Ateneo de Cebu. So, and our house was just beside the school. So, if he was going to enter the school, to his left would be a wall, and to his right would be our balcony.
Yes.
So, I made it a point to go to Cebu.
Yes, yes.
And then I photocopied my dissertation and gave it to him through the bishop.
Wow.
But I don't know if he read it.
But then that was not the only time that you met John Paul II.
Yes.
Yeah.
The second time was World Youth Day.
World Youth Day.
Yeah.
That's I think buhay na ako nun. It was in the 90s.
1995.
Yeah.
And I was in charge of all the activities here in
because you're
in Ateneo. You know.
Dean of Students.
I was assistant dean for student affairs.
Yeah.
And one of the priests who said mass in the high school covered course was Bishop McGee, who was the secretary of Pope John Paul I.
The first.
And of Pope John Paul II. Later.
Okay, yeah.
And so after the mass, we invited him for lunch, and then we gave him we found out that he belongs to a family of musicians. You know? And each one of them played an instrument. and he loved that theme song of World Youth Day.
Okay.
So we gave him a copy of the musical score, okay, and a cassette.
Yeah.
And then he began to share a story about Pope John Paul II.
And what's that story?
When John Paul I was elected Pope, he asked Bishop Magee to look for a retreat master because he was going to make a retreat, but a retreat master who would be good in meditation on death. And so he asked
This is John Paul the First. John Paul the First.
John Paul the First. So he asked John Paul the First, "Why on death your holiness?" And then John Paul the First said, "I was not supposed to be the Pope."
Oh, so he knew he was going to die.
Yeah, I was not supposed to be the Pope. And so the Bishop Magee asked him, "Who was supposed to be the Pope?"
Yes.
And John Paul I said, "The one sitting on the particular seat in the conclave."
Yeah.
Okay.
I think the one sitting next to him.
I don't know. But anyway, he passed away. Okay. And on foresight, on hindsight rather, Bishop Magee said, why would he attach a first to his name if there was no second?
Yes.
Pope Francis, the first pope to take the name Francis. So you don't say Pope Francis the first.
No.
So he had a premonition that he was not going to live long. Okay? So when he died, Bishop Magee returned the keys to the Vatican. Okay? And then when Karol Wojtyła was elected Pope John Paul II, and he took the name John Paul II, he also appointed Bishop Magee as secretary. And so out of curiosity, Bishop Magee opened the conclave to find out where Karol Wojtyła was seated.
Yes.
And it was exactly
where John Paul
the First pointed.
Yes. All right.
So that's
yes.
Okay.
And indeed, John Paul II is probably the only pope who is also a phenomenologist.
Yes.
All right. So let me go to the questions prepared for us. So Scheler shows that feeling is an immediate response to a value or to values. It is for this reason that feeling becomes a genuine source of moral choices. However, it seems to be that valuation is not necessary but only relative to the personal preference and inclinations of an individual. In fact, in the larger sphere, every culture and historical period has a distinctive ethos. In this sense, value appears to be wholly subjective, which often result to conflicting value systems. Considering this, is value really a reliable ground for ethical decisions, especially as it's related to emotions?
Correct. I think we need to bring out one emphasis of Scheler with regards to values. Okay? Values, in contrast to what we call goods, okay, are immutable, eternal, objective. Okay. A good is a carrier of value. Okay. But values are qualities that do not change. So for example, if I have a blackboard, okay, and I asked you, what's the color of the blackboard?
This one?
No, that's not the blackboard. Okay, but if you have a blackboard, usually the blackboard is not really black,
it's not
right?
black, yeah.
It's green.
It's green, yes.
So, okay, if it's a blackboard, it's colored green, I will paint it blacks to make it really a blackboard.
Yes.
So the question is, what has changed? What has changed in that?
Nothing much.
No.
You mean the color?
There is a change. Okay? What has changed? Is it the color or the blackboard?
Just the color.
No. The color does not change.
The color doesn't change.
Black will always be black, and green will always be green.
Yeah.
But before, the blackboard was carrying the color of green. Now it has changed. It carries the color of black. So values as qualities do not change. It is the goods that changes. Okay, so when you say that values are the source of ethics, of morality, we are referring to the objectivity of values.
Okay, yeah.
And so, what was mentioned before was there is a hierarchy of values, okay, and this hierarchy is objective. This
all right.
hierarchy is objective. It's our preferences that makes an action good or evil. So you have a criterion that any particular situation, my decision or my action is good if instead of preferring a lower value, I prefer a higher value.
Always, right? One never prefers a lower value over a higher value.
That is what makes an action evil.
Yes.
If it prefers a lower value in place of a higher value.
That reminds me of St. Augustine. There's Augustinian in the Scheler.
Oh, yes. Yeah. He prefers Augustine rather than Thomas Aquinas.
Yes. But in that sense, even if values are attached to emotions, there are some principles which guide the emotions.
Yes. So that's why the book is titled Non-Formal Ethics.
Okay. What does that mean?
See, for anything, whether it's a thing or an action, there is form and matter.
Yes.
Right? So, for example, a chair has a form and a matter.
Yes.
Okay. What is the form, the matter? The form, the matter is related to the use of the thing.
Okay.
Okay. So the chair is to be seated upon. Okay. And therefore, the form of the chair will always be universal. Okay. It will be the same for all chairs.
Yes.
But the matter will be different. You know, some chairs can be made of rattan. Some chairs are made of wood. Okay. Some chairs are made of steel. Okay. So the matter is relative, of course, to what a subject prefers, right? So there are people who prefer rubber chairs than wooden chairs. Okay. So the material, therefore, is different.
Yes.
Okay. So the same way with an action. An action can have a form and a matter. Okay. What is the form of the action? The form of the action is usually related to the end of the action.
Yes.
Okay. And therefore, it is universal. So a formal ethics would be like Kantian ethics, no? That an action is good if it can be universalized. Okay? Whereas in Scheler, what is the source of morality would be the material of the action. Okay? And the material of the action would be the values. So he is contrasting, he's going against Kant. He's saying that, no, we can also have a morality that is not based on the form of the action.
In that sense, it's phenomenological. That's because
right.
it is not before the experience.
Yes.
It is from the experience.
From the experience itself, the content. Okay? Now, of course, there's nothing wrong with realizing a lower value, as long as you are not replacing a higher value. Okay? There's nothing wrong. I'm fan of going to movies.
Yeah.
If I go to a movie, that's not wrong.
Yeah.
Okay. But if I go to a movie when it's time for my orals, then
that's where it becomes problematic.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. So in ethics, what is good can be determined either by ought or value. In the case of the former, goodness stems from an act that conforms to duty, whereas in the latter, from the preference for higher value. How is the duty-based, speaking of Kant, how is duty-based morality different from a value-based one? And by extension, which is more fundamental between the two? In other words, which is more realistic to say, because it ought to be, therefore it is a value, or because it is valuable and so it ought to be? So what comes first, the ought or the value? That seems to be what's being asked here.
So that's why, in contrast to Kant, Scheler is saying that really what comes first is the value rather than the ought. Okay? In other words, because it is valuable, then it ought to be. Okay?
Yes.
Unlike in Kant, because it ought to be, then it is valuable. No? But from experience, really what comes first to us is value, because it's the object of our feelings. Okay? And a feeling is an immediate response. Okay? Of course, as was explained, if there is a hierarchy of values that would also correspond to the different kinds of feelings. Okay? So there is an order in feelings. Okay? We have the superficial feeling of the five senses. Then we have the feeling state. Okay, and then we have the psychic feelings. Okay, and finally we have the spiritual feelings. So there are also different
levels of feelings. That's very interesting. So in other words, the feelings would open us to values, while in Kant, we don't know what opens us to duty. No?
Yes. And from a phenomenological point of view, we tend to act from our feelings. We tend to act from our feelings. The another word for feelings is emotion.
Yes.
Notice the root word is motion.
Yes.
Okay? From experience, for example, here in the Ateneo, we've been stressing the value of becoming men and women
Yes,
brothers.
yes.
No? From first year, on the orientation day, up to senior year.
Yeah.
Okay? And we repeat that even on oral exams.
Yes.
Okay? But it's only when a senior goes through an immersion program that he values
Yeah.
the
Solidarity with the poor.
values, the value of being men and women
Yeah.
for others.
So you need the experience,
Yeah.
and the experience will elicit
feel
the
it.
emotions.
Yeah.
So that's really what phenomenology
Yes,
does.
we can talk about being men and women for others,
Yes.
and not really.
Yes, while it
Practicing
is universally acceptable, of course, to be men and women for others, it's still not understood unless
becomes-
there's an experience and then there's the feeling.
Yes, it's simply a concept.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
When we think what we think are concepts. Okay?
Yes.
And we can conceptualize the value of being men and women for others without becoming one.
Yes, yeah. All right. And that's also where music is also important, because music can move you to the higher values.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Our last question, for the sake of clarity, it might be better to situate the matter in the context of love.
Yeah.
So in love, which has more value, to love because I ought to, or to love because I feel?
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
There is something very original in Scheler's phenomenology of love. Okay. And what is that original insight? That love opens up to the higher possibilities of the beloved. Okay. In other words, love is always intentional. In other words, it opens, it's directed towards anything that has value. It's not directed to a value. Okay? It is directed to a thing, a being that has value. And that being could be another person. Okay? That being could be your career. Okay? That being could be your nature, okay? Could be your vocation, okay? But if you love that being that has value, it opens to higher values. And
The being itself is open to higher values.
There is a vision of the higher possibilities of the being that you love.
Yes.
Okay? And these higher possibilities belong to the very nature of the beloved. So, loving is not out to change a person.
Did you hear that? Loving is not out to change the person.
It's not to make to make the person what he ought to be. Because then that will be conditional. That will be conditional. You're saying to the person that you love, become this, otherwise I will not love you.
Yes.
Okay. It becomes conditional.
Yes.
Okay. So love intends a being that has value. Okay? It does not intend a value. In other words, you don't love a person because he's intelligent, because of certain qualities that you value.
You love the person.
No, that's not. So it's not directed to a value, but directed to the being that has value.
You love that person.
But it does not stop there. A higher possibilities open up.
Yes.
Which it belongs to the very nature, the very essence of
when you love that person.
Of that person that you love. That's why there is a movement. For Scheler, if there is no movement, there is no real love. There is no real love.
What does it mean there's no movement?
In other words, okay. Many times the question is asked, how do I know I love a person?
Yes.
Could it be just romantic love?
Yes.
Falling in love, infatuation? Okay. The answer there is, to paraphrase Scheler, would be, if you grow, if the beloved that you love grows, becomes more of what she is, because becomes more of what she truly is, then it's love. And you yourself, the lover, also grows.
Yeah.
You grow. So that's the movement.
Yeah. So there's flourishing. There's flourishing.
There is flourishing. There are higher possibilities.
So when if it is just a feeling of love,
it stops. If it's just a feeling state, but love is not a feeling state.
Yes. So it is direct. It's intentional.
It's a movement. It's a really movement.
It draws you out of yourself to the person.
And to the higher possibilities of that person.
Of that other person.
And the same with your higher possibilities. It's the same thing when you love your career or your vocation. No, you grow.
Yes.
You grow. You discover.
So love is that which allows us to grow.
Yes. You discover higher possibilities in your vocation.
Yes.
If you love your vocation, okay. I love my teaching, okay. Teaching opens me to higher
you want to be a better teacher.
Yes.
Diba?
I grow.
And to be the best teacher that you can be. Or student, if you're.
And the same with nature also. When you love nature, you discover higher possibilities in nature.
Yes. Yeah, I can see why John Paul says. So first, it goes beyond that duty base, that Kantian categorical imperative, and it's grounded in experience.
Yes,
and we can also see that John Paul II must have been drawn to the materiality, because he has a theology of the body. So the materiality of love itself. But that love is not in the body itself, but the person, the person, and that very relationship with the person leads to the flourishing of the person.
So Scheler was asking in his work, was asking Kant, do you love because it is an obligation, or which is better? To love because it is an obligation, or to love because I'm happy loving? So there's more to the feeling than to the obligation.
Yes, and the sense of being happy is leads to more love, I suppose. Yeah. So you have heard it not only explained in the correct, but in a deep way, but in a very clear way. That's always the way of Dr. D. Very clear, very succinct, and to the point. and so he can really teach you how to teach as well. So that's our episode on Max Scheler. Maybe we should talk more about Max Scheler in the department.
Yes.
And maybe also the theology department can speak of the philosophical part of the theology
Theological
of John Paul.
John Paul.
So thank you, Doc Manny, for explaining and being with us. And thank you also to Reynald for preparing the PowerPoint. So we'll see you next week. And the next episode is the synthesis with the chair of the philosophy department, Dr. Jean Tan. We leave you with something that is associated with John Paul II.
We had this feast day a few weeks.
That's true. Yeah. So with that, we leave you and see you next time.
Meron? Ano nga ba ang meron? Paano nga bang mabuhay ng tapat sa meron? Don't you wish you can relive your Philo classes? The terror teachers? The terrible oral exams? Or the even terrifying but liberating and life-changing aha moments? Lundagin Mo Beybeh! Here's your chance! Lundagin Mo Beybeh! Kasama ang mga pilosopong sina Jovy Miroy at Ron Capinding. Lundagin Mo Beybeh! Leaping upward, leaping forward. Lundagin Mo Beybeh! Leaping to greater heights, to greater wisdom, to greater magis. Lundagin